Today I want to give you a totally very different perspective on illness and health and wellness, and all linked around the gut. The topic today really starts out very, very simply. It's about gut secrets and gut healing. The first part, gut secrets, is bringing all of the information that I can find from the scientific journals. I am an ex-academic. I was an associate professor at university. I did my PhD in the early 90s. And since then, I'm passionate about evidence and getting this out to you. The unfortunate thing about, in fact, my wife says I'm OCR, an obsessive compulsive researcher. And every morning I wake up, and before I give my wife a kiss, she's still asleep, I go and do a little bit of research on there. Even this morning I posted up 6 studies to do with the gut and a few others to do with nutrition on our various Facebook pages. You have heard of Gut Health Australia, have you? Please, if you haven't, join. Now, you get the idea, because if you don't do it now, you're not going to do it, and that's the problem. And when it comes to your health, there is nothing more important than getting the information and taking action on it. And today I'm going to give you some amazing information. But I want to go back. It's about the gut secrets. You see, the information that comes through as a scientist is very different to what you see in the media, and it's very different to what you see in terms of even your GPs. They're all so busy out there doing their own thing that they will find out about this 20 years later. Yes, they know about the gut microbiome axis, they know about a few things, but they don't understand the implications of it. All those other things, 101 other things. You see, it's not just the microbiome, there's a whole raft of things I'm going to share with you so you understand it. And this links with all forms of chronic illness, as I will show you. But the second part about this, not just the information, it's about gut healing. Because I'm a very practical person. About 12 years ago, we ran the Children's Healing Centre in Perth for a short time. My wife's a naturopath, Martine, my partner in all of this journey. And we're always passionate about getting the information to people to help them resolve their issues. Now, on that issue of healing, what's really important is every individual is different. Every individual is different. So there is no one program that will ever suit you that's going to suit anybody else. It might help. And you hear these people selling you, oh, I've got this program that helped me with SIBO, and it helped me with IBS, and it helped me fly. All these other things, and it won't work for you. It won't work for you, and I'll explain as we go through why. Or it might work, or some bits might. So I try to get across to people, it's about your own personal responsibility. Get a food, symptom, health conditions diary and log it in every day. Just on my Facebook today, or yesterday I posted, what foods do you eat that cause reflux? And some people say, oh, no, I don't know. Well, wouldn't you think it's sensible to find out? But most people don't think about it. So get a food, it's a simple, by the way, I've got the 50-cent solutions. All the stuff I talk about is 50 cents. This is an expensive one. It's $2 at Kmart. Get a book. Get a diary and put the foods that you eat and the reactions you have, because you will then be able to trace things back. So my message is really simple. It's about the 50-cent solutions that I'm going to give you today that you can go back and test and trial. They're not all going to work for you, but they will help you in some way, and then you build your own program around it. Before I get underway though, it's really important to understand that as a researcher, by the way, I do more research now than I did as an associate professor with a team of researchers and so on, for the sheer fact that I don't have any bureaucracy or any other conditions or any other limiting factors there. And I get this research and we write it into our books, which we then disseminate, and through our talks, we do 80 talks. We'll do 80 talks this year, and in those 80 talks, we'll talk to about 10,000 people around Australia. So we literally are getting the great gut movement going, and we've been doing this is our second year, and every time we go back to a place, the numbers get bigger. So we normally have capacity. This was a passive crowd. We didn't put any marketing into it at all, and we've got 50 people here. So this is a topic that is really hot, and why it's hot is because at the end of the day, I firmly believe that gut health is the single biggest health issue confronting Australians today. It's not obesity. I've worked with research on obesity. I've worked with research on tobacco smoke. I actually wrote the paper years ago which got tobacco smoke banned in clubs and pubs and cafes and restaurants in Western Australia, which then led to it being banned in all the other places around Australia, except New South Wales, for 10 years, because the Premier of New South Wales then took on a lucrative directorship with Philip Morris. Do you see something wrong? There is always a political interest and a financial interest in there. I'm open. My financial interest is our talks and that, and we're not millionaires, trust me. We're passionate. We do this because we're passionate about helping people. I'm sick of seeing people sick. And gut links to all of these conditions, and gut, one way or another, links to every single health condition. In fact, sometimes at a talk, people will come up to me and say, "But Pete, is it linked with this?" And one time it was depression. So I said, yes, I've seen research. I went back, scanned a few articles, sent them off to them, and there they are. All the research. It doesn't matter. I cannot find an illness that the gut is not linked to. Now, if you can, please show me. But do your research first. I can't find an illness. In fact, it was really interesting. I mentioned diabetes type 1. I think it was about 6 months ago, and someone said, "That's ridiculous, don't assume diabetes type 1. So I did a little bit of research, and since about 2013, there's an increasing number of studies linking diabetes type 1 with the gut. And what's interesting is just a couple of weeks ago, because I've been passionate about fibre. Boring, isn't it? Imagine getting excited about fibre. I go into Woolworths and get excited by their fibre packet. This is, wow, I've got a simple life, isn't it? So, my wife, to get me excited, shows me, no, we won't go there. So it's really simple. There was a research recently that they had mice that develop diabetes type 1. So they have these mice, different what we call mouse models or murine models, but mice models, and they test them, they have them get to develop a disease, and then they give them something and test it. And with these mice develop diabetes type 1. They're, the perfect model for it. And they simply gave them a gut protocol, and 90% didn't develop diabetes type 1. Sorry, can I have a wow?
Yeah.
Wow! And now you give me feedback, I'll give you more feedback. And at the end of the day, what it really means is that diabetes type 1 is a gut condition. Now, it might be a 5% one or a 95% one. I don't know. We don't know yet. And what happens in the mouse model doesn't happen 100% in the human model. But what it's showing is maybe diabetes type 1 is 30-40%. I'm making it a very broad academic guess here after reading a couple of papers only. 30 or 40% of diabetes type 1 is caused by the gut. Maybe. But you get the idea. It's linked with all of these conditions. It doesn't matter which one. Every form of chronic illness, from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, it doesn't matter. Arthritis, psoriasis, eczema, asthma, acne. They now know there's this link between acne and the gut. Now, what's interesting is the two main treatments for acne. Now, I know most of you are over your acne by now, I can tell that. But there are two treatments for acne. Do you know what the treatments are? One is antibiotics. So hold on, think. Antibiotics, wipe out the gut. Fix up asthma, short term until you go off them, and then it comes back with a vengeance. Now, another one is called Roaccutane. And Roaccutane, they were talking about it about 2 weeks ago in a paper I was reading, and Roaccutane works by changing the skin microbiome.
Oh my God.
The skin microbiome, and it works that way. But it's got serious health risks. In fact, that's why they monitor the liver every 3 months, your liver activity. And so rather than fixing your skin microbiome, by the way, I'm not just talking about the gut microbiome today. That's going to be focused on later, but I'm going to be talking about the skin microbiome, the respiratory microbiome, the hair I don't have one by the way, but hair microbiome. We've got these bits and pieces. Every part of us is connected to this diverse ecology of microorganisms. And what we do and what they do interact in a two-way street. So we've got all these conditions. The interesting ones, probably one of the earlier studies on the microbiome was really fascinating. It was in Nature in 2006. Now, Nature is one of these scientific journals. If you get published in Nature, and I never got anywhere near it, if you get published in Nature, you're the bee's knees of the scientists for at least a week or two, okay? And this paper came out, and they were following a group of people. And these group of people put on weight. And as they put on weight, their microbiome changed. And as their microbiome changed, they put on weight. So the question they begun with is the microbiome causing the weight gain, or is the weight gain causing the microbiome? By the end of it, they had hypothesized that it's probably the microbiome causing the weight gain. Or, again, two-way street, but that's probably the driver. And so then they did their research, and there's now been hundreds of studies linking weight gain with the microbiome. In fact, the best ones are with mice, where they transplant some poo from skinny mice into fat mice, and the fat mice get skinny. And the fat mice, they take the poo and put it in the skinny mice, and the skinny mice get fat. Now you're looking around the room saying, is there a skinny person around here? Maybe I can do a bit of poo sharing. So, message is, folks, we now know the importance, but that's only a part of the equation today. So with that in mind, we've got, just as an example, women's health issues. Again, whether it's 5% or 95%, these conditions all link to the gut. So, and all you've got to do is look at one of the mechanisms, the estrogen. By the way, a lot of people will come to me. I'm not a medical doctor. I've made that clear. I'm a PhD researcher, and I'm passionate about research. So I don't give people a prescription. I never tell anyone to come off medication. But when somebody comes up and says, I've got this condition, my response, and I'm going to get you to say this a few times, is fix the gut. Fix the gut, fix the gut, fix the gut. Because as you'll see later on, you need to fix the gut because it is broken, if I put it in a very poor colloquial term. But what you've got with estrogen is estrogens literally are regulated through the gut microbiome. And so if you've got an over-estrogenation, or you've got problems with estrogen, or any of the conditions that linked with estrogen, all the way through polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, then there's a 5 to 95% chance that it's linked with the gut somewhere. And so the simplest thing is, if you start to fix the gut, you start to not just fix one, but many of them. And your vaginal microbiome composition, urinary tract infection, right through to, as I've said earlier, acne and skin conditions. So in terms of women's health, and I put up women's health here, by the way, because 95% of the people who come to my talks are women. When I do men's health, it's 50%. Do you see something wrong with that? Yeah, what the men don't understand is I have all the best looking women in my lectures. And if they want to meet someone, they go to the pub, come to my talks. So if all diseases are linked, what links them? Well, at the end of the day, there are three processes. And the top one is inflammation, oxidation, and acidosis. Inflammation, oxidation, and acidosis. You've all heard of those to some degree, and we all explore and try to understand them to some degree. Now, I've written a book on all about inflammation, oxidation, acidosis, and I still only know a fraction of it. I referred to about 1,000 studies in it, but I still only know a fraction of it. There are people who spend their whole lifetime looking at one of these areas and still don't know, because it's always evolving and so on. But these three conditions, inflammation, oxidation, and acidosis, are all linked to all these conditions, the same as all these, exactly the same. So what we do know now is inflammation, oxidation, acidosis is linked with these, and so all we need to do is lower inflammation, oxidation, and acidosis, and we start to get better. Is it the only solution? No, there are other factors in there, but we start to get better. Thank you very much. Hope you like the talk. That's the abbreviated version, okay? But if you get the concept. So one of the things I'm going to highlight today is how we do that, and especially how we do it via the gut. Because in 1907, a Russian zoologist called Elie Metchnikoff discovered that something from the bacteria breakdown products, and he said some chemicals and some bacteria were getting into the blood and causing the wear and tear in the aging process, senescence. Basically the diseases of arthritis, and back then there wasn't much Alzheimer's, and so all, and Parkinson's and all those conditions, and he linked it to it. 1907. Now, what's interesting, for about 20 years the research on this grew until all of a sudden the pharmaceuticals took over, and then it went down. And now a lot of people realise that they've heard about inflammation, and the only way you can deal with it is non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I'm sorry folks, there are so many better ways to deal with the inflammation, oxidation, and acidosis. In fact, when you deal with one, you deal with the other and the other as well. It all comes into a system, and you'll see as we plod through today, as we go through today, you'll see a lot of this information coming forward. But Elie Metchnikoff knew, and he called it inflammation, and nowadays we call it leaky gut. Leaky gut caused by inflammation, leading to inflammation throughout the body and causing all those, whether it's the joint aches, the fatigue, the rundown, the aches and pains, cardiovascular disease, and so on. All of these conditions link through inflammation. And what's interesting, I think it was about 1989, Time magazine had this huge, I remember this is in the days when there were only magazines, and Time magazine had this huge article. The whole article was just on inflammation and cardiovascular disease and all these other conditions. So in 89, everyone was told that all these conditions were linked to the gut, were linked to inflammation. We now know that most of that inflammation comes via the gut. So if we can fix the gut, we can fix most of the inflammation. Which, by the way, if you fix the gut inflammation, you fix the other. I didn't tell you about Alzheimer's, did I? No. They find. I forgot to. Yeah. Sorry for you, sir. I'll say I forgot to, just in case you forgot this time. Okay. So it's really simple. They've actually now detected bacterial DNA in the brain of Alzheimer's patients, and inflammation caused via the gut. So my message, nobody wants Alzheimer's. Anyone here want Alzheimer's? No, you don't. So what do you want to do? Well, you want to make sure you lower the inflammation in the gut, lower the inflammation throughout your body, and of course lower it there. And I'll explain one of the mechanisms. Do we know? We only know a little bit about it, but it's worthwhile taking steps, because it's resolving all of these issues at the same time. So inflammation, oxidation. Now if that's the case, then you'd find that if you've got a health condition, you're likely to have not just one or two. Now is that the case? Yes. See, this is cardiovascular. I'll answer the questions too, don't worry, you see. See, we're talking about multi-morbidity here. When you've got one illness, you're not going to have, or comorbidity, you're not going to have just one illness, so you don't just have a heart attack. You've usually got high blood pressure, but on top of that, you're more likely to have things like autoimmune conditions, atopic dermatitis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, gout, metabolic syndrome. Then mental health conditions including schizophrenia, bipolar and depression, cognitive impairment, cancer, and you're likely to die of everything else anyway. Morbid, isn't it? But I do it with a smile, so it's okay. So the message here is you go to your GP in the current model, which is really what we call reductionist. You go in there and you go, okay, which one am I going to treat? Oh, I'll treat the gout today because that's really hurting. And you'll get your medication for the gout and you'll treat that, that's okay, but it's not dealing with any of these other conditions. So my model, or it's not just mine, there are many hundreds, thousands of people around the world who are saying much the same, they're just not as loud as me. And they're saying the same. Treat the underlying cause, not the symptoms. Cardiovascular disease, heart attacks and strokes are not caused by cholesterol. Nobody has ever died of cholesterol, too high cholesterol. Some people die of low cholesterol now, thanks to the pharmaceutical companies. It's a part of your whole body's immune system. It's a part of your brain. Your memories are formed by the chemicals that form cholesterol in the brain, and your memories are formed. All of your steroid hormones are made out of cholesterol, estrogen, progesterone and testosterone are made out of cholesterol. So the message is, and by the way, if you lower the cholesterol, guess what happens, guys? Yeah, but don't worry, we've got another one called Viagra. So my message is simple. Deal with the oxidation, inflammation, acidosis. That's what is the underlying cause. Cholesterol is an association, not a cause and effect. It's linked in there, but it's not a cause and effect. And one of the best examples was an old lady, 86, and she'd outlived all doctors who told her to go on cholesterol medication, and hers was 13. So coming back to here, leaving the model that all these diseases are linked somehow through oxidation, inflammation and acidosis, then we go on to the gut, because Ellie Metchnikoff said it was something in the gut. But before I get onto that part about leaky gut, I need to get a concept across that I think is absolutely crucial and critical to understanding how all of the digestive system and how your body and everything else in the world works. And it's called pH. Now you've heard pH, haven't you? It's the acid, base, acid, alkali level. You've heard it, you can drink some alkaline water. You've got battery acid, Drano. Drano is up the top. There's a little model I made up, but I haven't put it out there yet. Drano's up the top at about 12 and 13, 14. Then you've got down the bottom battery acid. And here, your gastric acid, your hydrochloric acid, is 1. I'm going to come back to that. So we're going to call it a strong acid, but it's got a low number. It's a little bit confusing. It took me about 20 years to understand it. I couldn't understand it in year 10 chemistry when I learned it, Why? Anyway, it's gastric juices. The hydrochloric acid is a pH of 1, very, very strong. Then you've got your drinks and things like that, and this is where your digestive system works from here up, and then up the top. So everything works on pH. If you're a gardener, you know that. your plants work in a certain pH range. If you want really, really beautiful rhododendrons or roses, you have to have the right pH for the soil. You might add a little bit of lime, you might add a little bit of whatever else to acidify it if necessary. All plants, all organisms work in a pH. Our own body pH is about 7.36. That's inside our body, in our blood, and going to our cells. And if it gets to 7.4, we die. If it gets to 7.3, we die. You get the idea? A narrow range. Everything works in a narrow range. So when it comes here, what we've got to do, and that's what I've just written up there, this narrow range that everything works in, we then have to say, well, let's start with the digestive system. And I'm not going to talk about the mouth. I'll come back and talk about that in a moment, very briefly. But the most critical part of all this is the stomach. And what people don't realise is that the digestive system is a system. It starts in the mouth and ends up at the bottom. From the top to the bottom, literally. And most people will deal with one part. So if you've got colitis, or you've got Crohn's, or you've got diverticulitis, or you've got it, it's this part. And they'll look at this part and they'll go, oh, look at that, we better cut it out, or we better treat that. And what you don't realise is the whole digestive system is a system, and it may be caused by the fact that you've got the wrong stomach acid, or poor digestion up here causing it down there. And vice versa. It's like a car production line. If all of a sudden, something happens at the end of a production line, the rest of it blocks up. Or something happens at the start of it, it doesn't get through. Correct? That's how it works here. So what we've got to do is make sure the production line works. So when, again, somebody comes and says, look, I've got an issue down here, I've got bloating, I've got inflammatory bowel condition, okay, I say fix your stomach pH first. And then work on all of it. By the way, the solutions to one area usually works on all the areas at the same time anyway. That's how the body is designed to work. And so with this concept in mind, a lot of people get confused with too much stomach acid. They've been told you've got too much stomach acid, you've got reflux because of it, GERD because of it, you've got all these other conditions, so on. And the sad thing is we put on some medication which are pretty potent. In fact, they're deadly. The side effects are death. Okay, very early death and a lot of pain and suffering. Now, I'm passionate about this one in particular because my dad, I lost some of my inheritance because of this, because my dad lived on quickies. Do you remember the quickies? I think they're probably still there. And my dad would have a pocket. He spent $10,000, I'm sure, on quickies. I could have had it, okay? I could have had that quickies. Oh, sorry, the money. I didn't want the share of the quickies company that he should have owned by then. But every night my dad would have his dinner and, we'd wait a while, he'd go to bed and he'd be sitting up in bed all night just trying to digest. And then quickies would go down, and then another half an hour later, another quickies and another quickies. Every pocket had quickies, and it never ever resolved the situation because it's doing the exact opposite of what the body is meant to do. Why do you think the body has a pH of 1? Because at a pH of 1, it breaks down things, and it's incredibly good in a destructive way, or destructive in a good way. And so we've got to look at that totally different. And what we've got is, I've just listed 8 functions that I could come up really quickly. This is written in the scientific texts. This is what's taught at medical school if you do that chapter on digestion and so on. And it's really simple that the first and foremost one is digestion. Digestion occurs at a strong stomach acid. Now, the best example of this are proteins. Now, you all know proteins, you've all heard of proteins, but what happens with proteins is they're broken down into amino acids. You've probably heard that term too. You go to muscle building and get your amino acids and stuff like that. Well, what happens is if it's not broken down, it goes through undigested. Now, how do you break down proteins? Well, the first thing is proteins are tangled like this. You've seen those pictures on the sci-fi movies and the science movies where they're all tangles and different colours and things like that. They're big protein molecules. They're really, really big and complex. And what happens is you can't digest them properly. The enzymes can't get in to break them apart until you have the strong acid. At a pH of 2, they separate out, and then they can be broken into the chunks of the different amino acids. Some of the amino acids might go to form serotonin. Hold on, have you heard of serotonin? Yep. Melatonin, which is on the same sequence, and that's sleep and happiness and so on. Then you've got all the neurotransmitters, and you've got all these other amino acids. Our body runs on amino acids, proteins, but you can have a whole cow, to eat a whole cow a day, and unless you're breaking it down, unless you've actually got a strong stomach acid of 2, you cannot digest the protein. That's not possible. The pepsin, which breaks it down, the main one that breaks it down, also works in a strong stomach acid. So we've got to have that strong stomach acid. Now, one other ingredient here, by the way, one other amino acid, or 2 of them, plus vitamin C, go to form something called collagen. Have all of you heard of collagen?
Yep.
Yeah, because it makes your skin beautiful. Look, skin of a 92-year-old. Look, beautiful. Yeah, 92, not bad, huh? I'm joking, okay? It's, next year's 92. So the message, that's the only lie I'm going to tell, by the way. So it breaks it down, and you get the collagen, and the collagen goes to all where it does the work in the skin. But more important than the skin, it goes to the gut. Because your skin takes months to actually get better from collagen. Your gut wall has a turnover, and I'm talking the whole part of your gut wall, but your large intestine and small intestine too, has a turnover in terms of literally hours and days. So if you need, where does the collagen go? If you're consuming it, the first place it goes to is where it needs to be replaced, which is your gut lining. All the way up, it's made out of collagen. Your skin's made out of collagen. All these connective proteins and so on run everything. And if you're going to repair your gut, here's my first hint. You get the collagen. Now you're saying, well, am I selling a supplement? I'm not selling you a collagen supplement. They're good value and there's some good research on some of them. However, the critical thing here is you cannot get the collagen unless you have a pH of 2 in your stomach. So I want to get some collagen, I want to have some food. Now, by the way, where's a good source of collagen? Chicken skins. And you've been told for the last 50 years, don't eat chicken skins. And another ingredient I'll tell you a little bit later. But also you get them from the chicken, what is it, the chicken foot soup? The Chinese chicken foot soup? Yeah, I know there's going to be a run on in Chinatown over Chinese New Year. You're going to go down and get some chicken feet and make some soup out of it and so on. You're going, yuck, but guess what? And all of the bone broths are rich in collagen. So this is the type of material. By the way, there's a sorry?
Is there a veg alternative?
There's a veggie alternative, yeah. It's in my book. By the way, I'm giving you a fraction of what there is. There's a fraction of this type of information. I can't go through in the depth because, again, we would be here for at least 5 days. So you've got the collagen. Now, if you want to repair your gut wall, you've got to get more collagen. It cannot do it without it, and it cannot do it if your pH is sitting at 4 or 5 because you're on some form of medication, or you have big meals. Because what happens, I haven't explained this to anyone else, but as soon as you have a big meal, your pH of your stomach literally goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over out, if it's a really big meal, over here, and it goes down slowly, slowly, slowly. So my first hint is to eat smaller meals, slower, chew more, and get your acid at a pH. Now, if you don't have an acid level around about 3, you can't get your minerals breaking down and released. Iron. In the old days, your doctor would have said, go and have some spinach, but have it with some orange juice, a pH of 3. Because that actually helps with the release of the minerals from it. So you can't get minerals, and minerals go to do everything. They're the action. They're kind of the spark of life for all the enzymes that do all the work around your body. And then you've got your B vitamins. B6, B12, folate, and of course what's really biotin, which is really interesting. I put alopecia there because I just wanted to remember to tell you that there's a link with alopecia. There's a lady at the first talk we did, which was Mildura 4 or 5 days ago. Second talk, and she came up and she said, look, what do you reckon? She's showing me her hair. And I go, nice. What am I looking at? And she said, 6 months ago I had alopecia.
Wow.
6 months ago, and she had this full head of hair. And she said, I heard about it and I found out some of the stuff you were talking about and other people were talking about, and she went and worked on her gut, and within 6 months she's got this flourishing, beautiful head of hair. Okay? So, see how simple some of the solutions can be? See how simple? Now, is it going to work that easy for everybody? No. But everyone can benefit from the same information. Gut coordination, the movement through your gut is dependent on your pH. This is really critical in your small intestine. Okay? But in your stomach as well. Acid, when the stomach goes back to being acid, it says, okay, I've broken everything down, I'll let it through. I'll let a bit more through. We do force it through because we just keep dumping stuff on it. but pH. Then you've got the breakdown of allergens. Your things like casein from your dairy and your gluten. Everyone's heard of gluten now, haven't they? Well, why is gluten such a problem? It's because of what I call the gluten glut. And the gluten glut starts with the fact that we now have wheat that has a higher gluten content in it. It then goes on to this whole concept that we're now eating gluten-fed foods every single meal. So breakfast, we've got the cereals, lunch we've got the breads, and for dinner we've got the thing and it's got higher gluten in it. Then we've got added gluten in all these things. Plus, what makes it really, really worse is the fact that we've lost the protective layer in our large intestine to protect us against gluten and other things as well. And I'll get onto that in a moment. But the gluten, they're not broken down. And this is the end part. If they're not broken down at a pH of 2 and 3, then they will get through as whole, complete, big, ugly protein molecules which will cause problems in your gut, and you are then more likely to develop allergy to them, and in food intolerances, which shows up in the literature. When you take some of the medications, one of the side effects is an increase in the development of allergies along the way. So with that, then you've got the breakdown of toxins, but this is the most important one. Your stomach acid is a barrier to all the microorganisms in the world. Every breath you take in 100 million microorganisms. Don't try and filter them out, they're all good. However, what happens if they go down into the stomach? Now, if I've got a stomach pH of 5, pretty neutral, or 6, almost neutral, it doesn't do anything to them. But if I've got a pH of 1 or 2 or 3, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? They're going to burn, they're going to be burnt up, aren't they? Yes. So they don't get through. Now, one of the next conditions you learn about is SIBO, the microorganisms, wrong type of microorganisms growing in a place where they shouldn't be. And one of those factors is the pH to the stomach. People who go on these medications to lower pH have an increase in SIBO and inflammatory bowel, colitis, Crohn's, and all those other conditions as well. So it's linked with it. But this is an example. Helicobacter pylori, Candida, which is a fungi, Clostridium, Salmonella, Shigella, Campylobacter, a whole raft of these species grow. These are the wrong type of microorganisms. Now, you'll have them in your intestines, but they're a part of an ecological balance that I'll talk about in a moment. And the whole point is, if they're there, they've got a chance to grow out, and all the research shows low pH, you get more of these growing. Too many of them growing, causing a lot of health conditions. I should mention on this one, Clostridia is a major killer in our aged care facilities where people on proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, to lower your stomach acid, literally have diarrhea and die of diarrhea. Now, in this day and age, however, if you take them off proton pump inhibitors, the Clostridia stop, and then if you do some really simple strategies that I'll be mentioning, they've had great results in terms of stopping these people dying, but for some reason it's not done in Australian hospitals. Then we've got the pH. This is how it works. On a brief summary, alkaline in the mouth. If you've got acid in the mouth, you're going to end up with more tooth decay. Now, the acid in the mouth comes from two sources. One, from the processed foods you're eating. Two, from your own pH of your body. I don't have time to go into it, but if you're eating processed foods, you're going to have an acid pH in your body as well, and you end up with tooth decay. And they can detect the microorganisms in the teeth, in the mouth, up in the Alzheimer's brain as well. So it's pretty interesting. So you want to make sure that you've got the right pH in your mouth. Stomach acid, your small intestine here, alkaline, and then down the bottom, the large intestine, it becomes more and more acidic as it goes through, and then in the lady parts, acidic as well. So, and that's why you've got bacteria, you'll know of. This one is called Lactobacillus acidophilus. Acidophilus means acid loving. Well, acid loving, acid producing, that's what it does. So it's this bacteria that thrive down there, and that's in all the yogurts and so on, and lots of the probiotics and so on as we go. But Helicobacter pylori, this was discovered about it's been known of for a long time, and it's been known for almost 100 years that Helicobacter pylori was linked with stomach ulcers and stomach cancers. But two doctors, Warren and Marshall from Fremantle, my hometown, got the Nobel Prize because they contaminated themselves with it, and then got rid of it with an antibiotic, and all of a sudden, now the reason they contaminated themselves was because after about 12 or 15 years of telling everyone, no one was listening. It wasn't, so until they contaminated themselves and showed up and said, look, we got rid of Helicobacter, we got rid of the ulcers healed, until no one was listening to them. Why? Because there's too much money in quick ease and proton pump inhibitors and all these other ones, and you're fighting $1 trillion pharmaceutical industry. By the way, do you get the idea they don't like me? Yeah, that's okay. You'll find some other groups who don't like me as well, because what I am doing, as far as I know, telling you the truth from the way I read the research. So coming back here, the multimorbidity. If you've got Helicobacter, these are some of the conditions that you will end up with the same. So it shows what Helicobacter does is it gets into the stomach, it burrows in, with the association of other microorganisms, can set up a cloaking device as well so the stomach acid doesn't get to it, and it alkalizes everything around it by injecting its own sodium bicarbonate. It's pretty amazing how they do this. All these the opportunistic microorganisms cause these problems. Now, Helicobacter, you'll get in your life, and you'll have in your life, and the good thing is it'll pass through if you've got good stomach acid and you follow some of the protocol that we talk about. So then you lead into the small intestine after the stomach. And the small intestine, although a lot longer, it's small because it's skinnier, and what happens, as soon as food is injected into the small intestine, your body will inject in sodium bicarbonate, Mackenzie's brand sodium bicarb. No, not really Mackenzie's brand, your own personal brand that's a little bit purer, but it will inject in sodium bicarb. Now, why sodium? Because it's gone from acid now with the sodium bicarb to alkaline, and a big change, which means microorganisms can't grow. If they got through the pH of the stomach, they won't be able to grow there. But it's a pH of, I think, 7.5 or 8, and the microorganisms won't grow there. And then it also injects bile, which helps to control the microorganisms as well. So the small intestine, they don't want many microorganisms. That's what it's trying to do. The stomach acid stops it, and then the sodium bicarb, the bile, and then it injects in enzymes to digest the food. And the enzymes can only digest the food at a pH of 7. If it goes to 4 or 3, more acidic, it can't digest them. So the food will go through undigested. Now, this is where we get a problem called SIBO. Has anyone heard of SIBO before? Would you put your hand up? Okay, great. The other half, you'll probably go away thinking, I caught SIBO today. I came to Dingle's lecture and I ended up going home with SIBO. SIBO, there are ways of testing it. It's pretty easy to get some SIBO tests now. But the best way to describe it is that the food literally has gone down too far, so you can't burp the gas out. And it hasn't gone down far enough, so you can't fart it out. Okay? You can't flatulate it out. I'll say fart, it's a much better word, isn't it? So you can't. So it's stuck in the middle, and it goes blub, 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 and it can't go anywhere. So what it does is cause bloating, pain, and you will see some people who are incredibly skinny, and they'll have this brick. It looks like a brick, and they'll say, touch that. And it feels like a brick. It really does feel really rigid, and half an hour to an hour after a meal, they feel it. Now, the main treatment for that is something called FODMAPs. And you would have heard of FODMAPs. And I don't like FODMAPs. I don't like FODMAPs. It's treating the symptoms, not the cause. Now, the cause is that these microorganisms are in there and they're not moving through. They're breeding in a place where they shouldn't. The pH is obviously wrong. Now, remember how I said pH is really important? Yeah. The pH of your small intestine has to be alkaline. And there was a really, really good study, and it was done on animals, of course, but it was following on some work some other people were doing, and they alkalized the small intestine, and as soon as they alkalized the small intestine, the small intestine motility increased. It started and moving it all through. Now, what happens also is if you've got the wrong bacteria there, you can have some of them poisoning your gut wall, your small intestine wall as well. So you're going to end up with, a pretty sick small intestine, again associated with the pain and no motility or no movement through. So the best way to get some movement going through is by altering the pH. Now, this is where I'm going to give you one of my 50-cent solutions. The best treatment to rebalance your body's pH, it's called salt. table salt. Well, not table salt. I want a good coloured salt with some other minerals added to it. You know what I'm talking about here, whether it's Himalayan or Murray River. Or why? Because salt is made out of sodium chloride, NaCl. You all remember that, don't you?
Yeah.
NaCl. Well, the chlorine goes to form the hydrochloric acid. You cannot produce hydrochloric acid without salt. That's the major source of chlorine in your body. So you cannot produce enough stomach acid unless you've got salt. Now, don't think, oh, I'm going to go home and just eat salt. Oh, I'm going to go on Dr. Diggle's salt diet. You will end up like a prune, okay? And you'll be dehydrated. It's about a balance in your life. The problem is they've associated salt in processed foods with high blood pressure. That's the problem. High blood pressure is not caused by salt, it's caused by salts in processed foods. It's the processed foods. There was a huge study I put up on one of my Facebook pages a couple of days ago, and it shows, by the way, saturated fat is not linked with cardiovascular mortality. It was all, I think it was 20 European countries, and so many hundreds of thousands of people in it, and it said, it basically came to the conclusion that it's processed foods that's killing everyone. The lack of fibre, the lack of nutrients, the lack of thing which is in the processed foods. That's the conclusion it came to. Isn't it amazing how much money we spend just to find out what we know?
Yeah.
But we need this to convince people. Because most people won't act until they're sick. And then, unfortunately, they won't necessarily learn this. So coming back here, salt. Chlorine gives it the hydrochloric acid. Sodium gives it the sodium bicarb that injects into your small intestine. So it works. That's how the body is designed. That's why every animal, every organism on the planet survives with some sodium chloride in it, and in rebalancing the pH. And that's what it does for us in terms of our intestines. A simple strategy like that. And again, how much? Test it and see, and it's good salt. So going back there, then how can I alkalize my small intestine? And I searched high and low for this, and I found a couple of studies suggesting that if you consume sodium bicarb, and I say first thing in the morning, please listen to this. Sodium bicarb first thing in the morning, away from a meal. Because if you have it with a meal, you alkalise your pH for digestion. So you have it. So at home, I will wake up half a teaspoon. Please don't ask me how much. Half a teaspoon of sodium bicarb mixed in some water. How much water? That much. Any much. Doesn't matter any way you like, okay? You mix it up and you drink it down first thing in the morning. Why? Because then it goes through your system. It gets to your small intestine pretty well unchanged. It doesn't upset your digestion because you don't have food in your, well, you shouldn't have food in your stomach after 12 hours or 10 hours. It goes through and then it starts to alkalise your small intestine. And that small intestine, some people have told me that they get better results with taking a little bit more sodium bicarb. Suck it and see. Trial and error. You're an individual, work it out. So sodium bicarb, what a simple solution. And what type? You can get some biodynamic, you can get some organic, you can get some purified, and you get some Mackenzie's sodium bicarb from Woolworths supermarket. I'll mention Woolworths a few times. I don't have shares in them that I know of. Okay, but that's where some of the solutions. And so what else is there? Well, it's about getting to resolve SIBO, fix the stomach acid, because until you do, you're always going to have too many of the wrong type of microorganisms going in the small intestine. You okay with that?
So do
You got that principle?
the salt as well? Is it
Your salt's absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. And that just goes on your meal every single day. But again, you work out what you need and how much you need. Now, with that in mind, then we go through to the large intestine. Large intestine simply because it's wider. It's the one that takes from the small intestine down literally to the bottom, to the anus, where everything gets eliminated. Now, what's important here is you've heard of the microbiome. And the microbiome, remember, there's a microbiome for everywhere. But when people refer to the microbiome, it's the large intestine, where you've got supposedly, and depending on how they measure it, between 40 and 100 million different microorganisms in that area. And in that, you've got somewhere between, again, the studies, 400 and 1,000 different types. Forget the numbers, don't worry, there's a hell of a lot of them. We can't even conceive how many, there's 100 trillion, say there's 100 trillion, and say there's about 1,000 of them. And these 1,000 different types. What's really important about these microorganisms is that the broader the range, what's called the biodiversity, and you know this in a rainforest, right? In a rainforest, there's not one or two insects or one or two birds or one or two trees. There's thousands of each. Do you agree? So a rainforest is incredibly stable. A fire comes over to the edge, it burns a bit, it won't affect it. A disease comes in, it'll affect some, but it'll regrow. The weather changes, it all gets good. However, in a narrow microbiome, it doesn't have that protective mechanism. And this is the worst type of microbiome, at least in the agricultural world. There's wheat. A storm comes, it wipes out. A flood comes, it wipes it out. Hot weather comes, it wipes it out. It's very vulnerable and it has no resilience. Whereas in your gut, the more you have, the better it is. Now, how do you recreate that microbiome? And this is a lot of discussion going on at this moment. And they talk about the first 3 years. By the way, I did my first paper on this in 2005, 2006, all about allergies. That's how I got interested in this, because I was doing a lot of research on toxic chemicals, and I realised there was something else happening that we can't explain. And we just started looking into the microbiome. And I don't know if you ever know, we did an SBS series called Is Your House Killing You? Anyone see that?
Yeah.
You did? Oh, well done. Thank you. We've got a lot of SBS viewers here. It's rare. Usually it's about 3%. And even in one of those houses, we actually had a child, about 2 years old. He was orange. And once we decontaminated the home, we actually put him on a gut protocol. And this was back 12 years ago. We put him on a gut protocol, which is high-dose probiotics, along with fibre and a few other bits and pieces. Not as much as what we know a lot more. I know a lot more now, and we know a lot more. But it wasn't then. And he went from a 2-year-old who couldn't eat to a 2-year-old who ate his brother's food and annoyed the hell out of him. Literally in a period of about 6 weeks. And on the program, you see the difference. But what they didn't tell you on the TV program was that he went on a gut protocol as well. So that's you might go, it's one of the Sydney homes, very mouldy. They had mould everywhere. So that's how I got into this area. I had PhD students looking at mould. We had PhD students looking at antibacterial contamination. We had a PhD student, I think 14, 15 years ago, looking at caesarean birth and the health outcomes associated with the microbiome. So we've been playing in this area for over 20 years, one way or another. And that's how I got onto this. And now that I've left uni, I have more time to do the research and do the fun things. Not stuck in a laboratory and admin. Going with all this here, we've got all these conditions that increase as the microbiome goes smaller and smaller and smaller. So what we want to do is build it out now. So how do you build a rainforest? Well, you've got to have lots of seeds and you've got to have lots of feed. You can't put a kangaroo in a rainforest and not give it food. So the first thing is you've got to make sure you've got the food. And the problem we have now is our food diversity that we're eating is here. Most people will have a microbiome, a McDonald's microbiome. Or they'll have a gluten microbiome. Or they'll have they have, the average child now doesn't meet the 2 and 5 standard. And when they talk about the veggies, the average child in Australia has 2 vegetables. One's potato, the other's a potato chip. Something is wrong with that. And yet you look at all the meals of 100 years right back, they were always cocktails of many foods. A good curry's got at least 12 ingredients in it, 12 different, potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory and alkalizing agents. That's what a typical curry, and you sprinkle it on, and you don't just have a goat curry with a bit of goat in it. It's got all these other things and sauces and stuff, another half a dozen ingredients. So I tell people it's 25. It's not 2 and 5, it's 25. 25. Oh yeah, you'll also hear people talk about, don't eat too much fruit, it's got sugar in it. I'm sorry folks, unless you're fructose intolerant, eat fruit. Get rid of the sugar from the other sources, eat fruit. And all the research I can see, from the research on diabetes type 2 and metabolic syndrome and blood sugar levels, right through to the microbiome, the more fruit and the greater diversity of fruit you eat, the greater diversity in the microbiome. So, what do? We're going to eat 25 a day. How do you do that? Well, normally there's a rosemary plant hanging out somewhere, and you go get a little snippet off it, and you chew it. Now the good thing is it's raw too, and I'll mention that a little bit later. And that rosemary bush feeds feeds your rosemary microbiome eaters. Now in the beginning it's not going to do much, but it will have a little bit of a benefit, and it gets more. And I'll give you an example of probably the best research, which is all on green tea. So put your hand up if you like green tea. Okay, put your hand up if you don't like green tea. Keep your hand up, please, and I promise I will have it tomorrow. Thank you very much. Thank you for that promise. Now, you don't have to. It's just a concept. But what happens is when you have green tea, the first cup, your body is able to absorb about 6% of it. What? 6%? That's not much. 6% of these, what are called polyphenols. Polyphenols, poly means many, so it's just lots of these funny shaped molecules together. And in green tea it's called epicatechins. Don't worry about the names. But the first time you eat it, you'll only absorb 6%. Then, after that, if you eat it for or drink it for a couple of weeks, you'll absorb 10%, 12%, and get up to 90% over a year or 6 months, depending on how frequently you're doing it. So finally, your body is able to absorb more. Why? Because the microbiome digests it. They eat the polyphenols because they're big complex molecules. They eat them, they chew them up, they metabolize them, and the byproducts, the good byproducts, become available to us. So they increase the availability of all of the good polyphenols. And you've heard the polyphenols in turmeric and red wine. We'll touch on that one later. You know, all of these other ones you've heard of the benefits of. Chocolate polyphenols, coffee polyphenols. Well, they are only of limited value if we don't have a microbiome. But the microbiome enhances their digestibility and absorption. So if you can understand that, so you have them. So the more you have of any little bit, and a little bit of rosemary, picked off any bush I can find. Even yesterday, I picked a little bit off. A little bit like that is going to feed 100 million of those little microorganisms for the next couple of days anyway. They're only pretty small, remember? But there's a hell of a lot of them. And so what you want to do to create the biggest biodiversity is have the biggest biodiversity of foods. That's one part of it. There's another I have to add on later. But it's the biggest biodiversity of foods. And get away from that really narrow one that we eat in our Western culture. And one of the characteristics of all of the cultures that live long, if you have a look at what they do, you will find that they all eat a broad diversity, and most of them are linked to their own gardening as well. So there's a whole stand there. So what we want to do is increase that. So what are the four main functions? Now I could do 444 if you want. It doesn't matter. But I broke them into four to just give you a quick concept of how it works. The first one is digestion and nutrition. Not only does your stomach digest it and start to prepare everything, and then it passes through your small intestine, where the small intestine adds the enzymes, your own enzymes, to break it down. All going well, it then gets into your large intestine, and the microorganisms start to work on it. Now, microorganisms are little digestive factories. That's the best way to look at them. They're full of enzymes, and all they do is break everything down that goes in there, or as much as they can break down. And so they are enhancing digestion. So there are studies, and I put up a study today to do with celiacs having lower bone density and lower calcium absorption, one because of the dysfunction of the gut. But there are many studies highlighting the value of probiotics, the microbiome diversity. It adds, it enhances it, it does all the extra work, and it saves you a lot of time and energy. Now, if you can get everything going in there, your digestive system should work really easy in terms of digesting and absorbing food. Your immune system, touching on it briefly, around 80% or so of your immune system is around your digestive system. So any immune condition, autoimmune conditions, any immune conditions, allergies, are all linked one way or another to the gut. And what's interesting is for things, in a moment I'll show you, but for things to get to the gut, they've got to go over a little protective barrier called your mucus layer. And that's, I think, is the crux of a lot of all this. But your immune system is linked in your gut. You've got an immune system reaction. There's studies on probiotics, for example, have been able to demonstrate that they lower the incidence of viral infections, flus, and those things as well. They've been shown in treatments of HIV to improve conditions for them because they're working through the immune system. So there's a lot of positive stuff on the immune system. And then finally, communication and coordination. And I don't need to go into that because you've all read about the gut-brain axis. And it used to be a long time ago called the brain-gut axis, because there's this large nerve that goes down from the brain down into the digestive system called the vagus nerve. But what we now know is 90% roughly goes up. And what's critical about the stuff that goes down is we can actually shut down our digestive system by the way we think, feel and act. So from a psychological perspective, we can turn our digestion off. I'll go into that later. But what we do know is the vagus nerve carries all these messages up. Now, in people who have had what's called a vagotomy, where they cut the vagus nerve because their digestive troubles are out, which is a medical system's way of dealing with it, much easier ways to deal with it now, they know that those people, there are so many around the world, have a 50% reduction in the risk of Parkinson's disease. So we know that the vagus nerve, the messages going from the gut to the brain, are literally 50% of the cause of Parkinson's. So remember, it's linked with all diseases. Now, you don't cut the vagus nerve. What you do is you change the messages going up there. But on top of that, there are all these other ways it communicates through the immune system. In particular, it communicates through a whole raft of molecules I'll mention a few times from now, called short-chain fatty acids. You're going to love this one. The stuff on short-chain fatty acids, how good they are. But it coordinates everything. The genes, there's 100 times more genetic material. If we wiped out our gut, we would not be able to function as a human being. They are part of our evolution. They're evolved with us, and they've evolved to communicate with us, and they listen to us at the same time. Something called quorum sensing. So they can listen and read the state that you're in. So the message is communication and coordination. Skimmed over this information. It's just, honestly, there are hundreds of people's lives just in one section of each of these. In fact, this lady here did her PhD on autism and the gut microbiome, and so you know, and she's doing work out at Swinburne College. That I knew of some of it. So, but there's a huge amount going out there around the world. But one of the hardest things is for it to be translated from the researchers into the public. And that's what we try to do. We interpret it and get it out there. And once something is published, it's often been already researched and done for a couple of years, and it takes a while to get published. It's getting faster and faster. And then the public finally hear about it 10 or 20 years later, unless it's really fashionable. So that's what our aim is, to get out. Now, the fourth function of this is the gut barrier. And why I make this an individual function is because it links so much to so many of the health conditions. In particular, something called leaky gut. Now, the medical system says you're not allowed to say leaky gut. So I say leaky gut, leaky gut, leaky gut, leaky gut. Why I say that is because that's what Ali Metchnikoff basically was describing over 100 years ago, before even the pharmaceutical companies had a way of controlling our medical system. So with this in mind, our intestines are made up of bricks and mortar, a cell, and in between them something called tight junctures. And they have to let a little bit of food through. And it's regulated by various messages and chemical messengers and so on there, and it lets food through. Now, a healthy gut wall is like this. And there's the tight junctures, and then you've got the good microorganisms on top. And then over here you've got the mixture of the bad ones, and you get little cracks showing in the mortar. And when the cracks show in the mortar, it gets through. Now, if these gut cells aren't being fed, then they also get a little bit sick too. But your body will do everything it can to feed them, but you've got to make sure you do. And what's one of the main ingredients? Collagen. They have to have collagen. Now, I'm going to share with you in a moment some other really important nutrients that they love, but they have to have the collagen to stay healthy. Now, if they don't get healthy, then literally you end up with leaky gut. Now, this is my next model. Now, I'm terrible at graphics, so I just put it in lines. But this will impact all of you, and I need you to understand it. There are different layers. And if I've got the gut wall on the bottom, down here, just below the gut wall, you've got your blood vessels. So the difference between your feces, your poo, and here is minuscule. Minuscule, one cell. But it's got this extra protective layer here called your mucin, or your mucus layer. And your mucus layer is the most important protective mechanism for your gut wall. And most people haven't heard of it. Now, your mucus layer The outer one is rich in microorganisms and it only lets through the good ones. It's a bit like a moat and a castle. The castle is the cell wall and the moat. If you've got a really thin moat or no moat, all of the invading microorganisms can get in. If you've got a really thick and deep moat, then you're going to stop them all getting in. And that's where we've lost out in the last 50 years. Our moats, our mucin layer is dramatically reduced. That means instead of having this thick wall, it's really thin. So everything here in the fecal matter, all the contaminants, the chemicals, and the breakdown chemicals from the bacteria called LPS, lipopolysaccharides. These LPS can get down here to the gut wall and get through into the blood, and they can go and cause damage. They can go cause all these conditions. Arthritis, classic one, or get up to the brain. Now see, if you've got a leaky gut now, your gut membrane there, it's not that different to the membrane around your brain. It's the same materials. So if you've got leaky gut here, you've got to increase your chances of leaky brain up here. I know that's not a scientific term yet, and won't be, but you get the concept? So anything can get through, anything that shouldn't get through gets through. It's a barrier up there to prevent all the toxins, so now toxins can get in the brain, and molecules and chemicals from the bacteria can get into the brain, and as a result, and the DNA and even some of the bacteria can get into the brain, and you end up with Alzheimer's. So coming back to that, if we can fix this wall, we're going to also fix this wall here, the blood-brain barrier. Same essential ingredients, and collagen's the first one. But we've got to have this protective layer. And this protective mucus layer is produced by cells, some of these cells down here. And they produce it, one's called goblet cells, just like, you've got a goblet, imagining them drinking, and they protect and they produce it. Now, how much there is depends on how well. If you've got a healthy gut wall, they're going to produce lots of it. If you've got a sick one, guess what? They're not going to produce much. So they have to be looked after. And then the other factor protecting it is you've got to feed the bacteria so they don't start eating your own mucus layer. And what happens, if you do not have the main food ingredients for the bacteria, then they eat your mucus layer. And the main food ingredient for your bacteria is fibre. Fibre and fibre. Now fibre, when I talk about fibre, I'm not talking about just one type like psyllium which you get. I'm talking about hundreds now. But you've got two main types, soluble and insoluble. The soluble one is the one that, you mix up a drink and it already turns into a jelly. And you go, do I have to drink that? The insoluble one is the one that doesn't, and it just goes straight through. Now you've got them in all your plants. You've got your pectin fibres in your fruits and so on. You've got a whole raft of these different fibres. Some of the fibres you call prebiotics. You've heard of those, haven't you? Okay, prebiotics. But it's much more. They're going to have to work on the definitions of these because it's even after reading a couple of hundred studies on fibre, and I spent literally the last 6 months just reading on fibre to the point where I believe in 10 years' time, if not earlier, we will be able to treat a lot of chronic conditions by particular and very specific fibres, with some other things happening, but that's where I believe we're at. Now, how do I know that? Because one of the main treatments for diabetes type 2 is a drug called metformin. Anyone heard of that one? Metformin works. It's not a drug, it's a herb. It's actually derived from the African lily, but then they change the molecule so they can patent it. Okay? Oh, but herbs don't work, do they? No. Cholesterol medication's made from red rice yeast, or derived originally from red rice, aspirin and all these. Many of them are from herbs. So coming back, what we know is this mucus layer is protected, and there's a particular bacteria, when you have metformin, it stimulates the growth of a particular bacteria. So it's a prebiotic for a particular bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila. Akkermansia, I love mucus. What a great name. Why don't you name your kids? I love mucus, you know? But that's what it's called, mucinophilia. I love mucus. And what it does is this Akkermansia mucinophilia eats and chews on the mucus layer and improves it. Now, it only works in 80%. And I actually think the 20% who don't work are with people already with gut issues, serious gut issues, like inflammatory bowel and colitis and Crohn's and big digestive troubles. But it works in 80%, and 80% what it does is it breaks it down and it helps it renew it. And it helps by regulating the blood sugar level. And what is it? It's a prebiotic. If you inject it, it doesn't work. If you kill all the gut bacteria off, it doesn't work. So the message is really, really simple. Anything to do with looking after the mucus layer is protective. It can work with us. And so what we want to do is build it. Now what protects it? Fibre. Because the bacteria eat fibre. If there's no fibre, they've got to eat something, and they've got all these glycoproteins and other good nutrient sources inside the mucus layer, and they start to chew on it. So they start to chew on it, and if there's no fibre at all, and the average Australian consumes about 10 grams of fibre a day, they're supposed to consume about 35 or something, or 40 depending on age, sex and other things in between, but I think it's probably close to 100 grams. If you look at the hunter-gatherer, the amount of fibre that they consumed was closer to 100 grams a day. Some people have even gone to 200 and 250, and that means you've got to eat some more fibre. More fibre. Everything in it has to have fibre. And the unfortunate thing is, we have had no fibre for the last 50 years. And so their mucus layer is that thin instead of being like that. And as a result, the bacteria can eat it and get straight access straight to the gut wall, and they can poison it, and the LPS and the bacteria bits and pieces get to the blood and go wherever it needs to. Now, we know that works. That's how it works. So one of the best things you can do, protective layer, is build up fibre. Now, what type of fibre? Here it is, a 50-cent solution. Woolworths. They have two brands. One of them is the Psyllium Macro, that's an insoluble fibre, so you've got to drink it quickly. The Psyllium Macro, which means it's organic, and it's $5 for about a couple of months' worth. And you say, how much do you take? Well, hold on, they've got another one called Gentle Fibre. And the Gentle Fibre is a combination of another 4 or 5 different types of fibre. So you mix the two together. However, if you've got Crohn's, if you've got diverticulitis, be careful because it's got whole linseed in there. So if you do have that condition, I'd grind it up again, mix a little bit of the psyllium in, and then try it. And then suck it and see how much you can increase. But you don't only get your fibre from there, it's just another source. It's got oat fibre in there and a whole raft of other ones, okay? So you just need to work out what works for you. But the point is, it probably works out as about 10 cents a day to get those two fibres, mix them together, and then try. See how you go. Simple solution. And what it does is it builds up, or it protects the mucus layer so that the gut wall, because you're feeding it the collagen, starts to build it. However, the fibre does one other thing. Well, it doesn't. But when the good bacteria break down the fibre, and that's what they do, we can't digest it, so they break down the fibre. When they break down the fibre, they produce a group of chemicals called short-chain fatty acids. If you've got a pen, write it down. SCFA, short-chain fatty acids. What's so important about these is that they are gut and body healing. And the short-chain fatty acids, the first one you'd know of is called acetic acid. And acetic acid you would know of as vinegar. But the vinegar you eat doesn't get down there, it already gets digested. And I'll mention vinegar in a moment as well, but acetic acid. And another one is propionic acid. And the third one that I'm going to talk on for at least 2 minutes on is called butyric acid, butyrate. Butyric acid, butyrate. Why is that? By the way, the best source of butyrate that you can get in your diet is butter. Where do you think the word butyrate comes from? Butter, butyrate. And butter is about 3% butyrate. However, it won't get down to your large intestine to do the healing. Now, what is so good about butyrate is it's the main food source for your gut wall. See, they don't get the food from the blood like the rest of your body. They get the food from your digestion. And when they digest fibres, when they chew the fibres up and break it down, the gut wall gets fed. And butyrate is the one that keeps it healthier. Now, I know you're all on my Gut Health Australia, and you would have noticed today that I put up two studies to link with butyrate. One was higher levels of butyrate producing bacteria, and butyrate in the blood was linked with lower rates of atherosclerosis, which is the artery plaque. So if you want to reduce, see how it's linked? So if you want to reduce your risk of a heart attack and stroke, keep your plaque, and it's butyrate. How do you get it? Fibre. Fibre. Wow, isn't that fantastic? Now, butyrate is linked with lots of other benefits, other health benefits. At the moment, I can't even think of the second study I had linked in with butyrate. But at the end of the day, it's linked with all these health conditions, and one of the first things it does is repair the gut wall, or it feeds the gut wall. So you want a healthy gut wall to be a barrier, to be able to produce the mucus layer, you've got to feed it butyrate. Where do they get the butyrate? From the bacteria, the good bacteria, who produce the fibre. Who chew up the fibre. So you okay with that concept?
Yeah.
So, and I'll mention fibre in a moment because it'll have to come up in terms of where we deal with it, but that's the simplest model I can come up with to explain what happens there. Now, that then takes me on to another microorganism that can be a problem, Candida. Candida albicans is the main one. I think there's 160 different Candidas, roughly. There's 4 or so that are problems around the world, and this is the main one, Candida albicans. Now, it's a fungi, okay? It's not a bacteria, it's a fungi. By the way, I used to be a fun guy. And then I started lecturing. No, then I got serious, but it's a fungi, which means it's got a totally different way that it behaves, and it's actually bigger, much bigger than the bacteria, and it also sends down little hyphae, little legs or roots into wherever it is. So physically it can do some damage as well. Now, you all know of Candida because it's also called thrush. And the problem is not that you've got Candida, because everyone will have Candida at some stage. 50% of the population apparently have Candida, probably 20 to 40% in developed countries, in Australia and so on. And the problem isn't the fact that it's there, it's just breeding too fast and it's getting fed. And what it loves eating are processed foods and particular sugars. So the more of the sugars, and then you get the sugar craving because the Candida can actually communicate to you to have more sugar. These bacteria and the fungi can communicate with you to actually eat certain foods. This is their evolution, this co-evolution with humans over hundreds of millions of years. There's animals in the last 4 billion years, there's upright humans and so on. So it's amazing, you've got to understand that. So your sugar craving is in you, it's your Candida calling. Sugar at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, feed it fibre, tease it. And what happens is these short-chain fatty acids poison Candida. They poison Helicobacter, they poison the Clostridia, and they feed the good ones. Do you see how this is a win-win situation? I'm not talking about one thing working one place. By the way, most of the studies show that fibre improves stomach acid. So it improves reflux and GERD. How does it work? Well, not by diluting it, by actually getting everything working down below so then it can work above. This is how the system works. So, and the thing with these fungi is it forms this biofilm, a little protective mechanism like the Helicobacter that we can't get into it. It forms a combination with a couple of toxic bacteria. And so it doesn't respond to most of the fungicides. But do you know what it does respond to? Essential oils, herbs and spices. And so you look throughout history and there's been an abundance of use of herbs and spices. And in fact, how do I know this? Well, in 2006, the European Union banned the use of antibiotics for controlling prophylactic normal everyday treatment of animal and animal feed in Europe. Which means they then had to come up with a way of actually controlling all these microorganisms in the gut and guess what they've done? Essential oils, herbs and spices. And that's what we've used for thousands of years and we've forgotten how to do it. So now everybody has to add the herbs and spices. Add a curry. It's got a dozen different ingredients in it, which at least a half a dozen have been shown scientifically to reduce it. Who doesn't like curry? Mature your taste buds. It's really simple. Like the green tea. Green tea poisons the toxic ones as well. But oregano, rosemary, spices. And that's why I say go and have a chew on a bit of rosemary out there. And you can get some food-grade essential oils. In fact, one of the companies I know at least has a particular food-grade digestive oil. Now, I'm not a big one for doing that. It can be handy because some people have serious conditions and you can give it a go. I'm one for building it into your lives. So you just add more herbs and spices Every day I chew 3 or 4 herbs literally out of my garden every single day. I like it. My grandkids do it now. My 7-year-old, she goes, "Which one are we getting today, Granddad?" And we'll go out and pick one, and she says, "Oh, that's rosemary and that's oregano." Oh, the oregano's got a big taste, hasn't it? People, the repercussions of these operations along the way. And then you've got antibiotics. Now, antibiotics are great for saving lives, but we use them probably about 5 times too much for conditions that don't actually require it. And again, I put up a couple of studies on my Facebook group a couple of days ago, all about the overuse of antibiotics in this particular bronchial condition. I can't remember the name of it specifically, but we know it. And if you go for your children, unfortunately have 2 to 3 doses of antibiotics before they even turn 3. Every year. And so their whole microbiome is potentially wiped out. And it's in those first 3 years of life which we think that it's really where they're linked to, setting up the standard for the rest of life. Now, I believe we can change our microbiome, but the first 3 years is the critical part for making sure it's the best microbiome you can have. And of course, all of the research on antibiotics show it is linked with every single one of those conditions. Do I need to show you that list again? Including autism spectrum disorder, antibiotics. Now the problem is they're given willy-nilly for things that don't work, and probably the most common one in children is ear infections. Now, I was reading a couple of studies just a couple of weeks ago showing that ear infections, otitis media, guess what they are? Gut-related. They now detect hydrochloric acid and pepsin and gut microorganisms in the ear canals of kids with otitis media. Hold on. In fact, what I consider, if I think about it, they're probably the first kids who are going to get reflux. They're getting silent reflux or a form of reflux, and they've got these pains and things up here all the time. And so what we want to do, and why is that caused by? They might be on mother's milk, where there are other issues there, maybe even how they're laid down. I don't know. But we now know that otitis media isn't it's not this deadly. It's a bacterial overgrowth caused by your stomach. And so what you need to do is fix the gut first, then go and fix it, but not with antibiotics that wipe out the gut microbiome. Because all the research shows on otitis media that you get the infection again and again and again and again, and it only comes back, and then you end up with a lifelong cycle or roundabout on the antibiotic treatment system. So the message is they're linked with all of them. Then you've got the PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. And they're the ones, up to 20% of the adult Australian population is taking PPIs. And they're killing people. We've met a man on them for 27 years. And you could smell him from 1.5 meters away. And he said, they've now sent me home. They said, just go home and suffer until you die. He was orange. His liver was packing up. We gave him the presentation. He came up and said, "Thank you. For the first time, I've now understood it. I understand what they've been doing to me and what I've done." And then we heard from him to say, "Thank you. I didn't realise it was so simple." Is he over everything? No. We met a lady who was on it for 3 months, and in that time she developed diabetes type 1. She developed autoimmune conditions, allergies, in just the 3 months of being on them. They're the side effects of the PPIs, and they're given to anyone, just about everyone and anyone over 60 years of age, and everyone right down to kids nowadays. And the sad thing is they are alkalizing the stomach when you need to acidify the stomach. And the reality is you've got to eat good foods. And if you eat a big chunk of meat that's cooked on a barbecue, there is no way known your body can digest it, no matter how good your stomach acid is. And you might get by for the first 20 years of your life, but after that, I'm sorry, the system just winds down and you get repayment later. Then we've got all the chemicals. I used to do just a whole series of lectures just on this one where I started out, all the toxic chemicals in the home. But I realised, hold on, it's not just what they're doing to the nervous system, they're actually poisoning the gut. And all these antimicrobials that you put on the surface. Oh no, you see the ad, there's bacteria on the bench, there's bacteria everywhere. I've got 100 million bacteria on my hand right now. That's 50 cents worth of bacteria probiotics. You owe me, okay? The whole point about this is we live in a bacteria world. We live in their world. I don't know how many hundreds of trillions of microorganisms. We live in their world. If they weren't here, we wouldn't have anything breaking down and we'd be dying. Okay, so they are here, we're a part of it, and we're made paranoid because someone wants to sell you a product. Oh no, there's bacteria on the bench, I better get a chicken leg and wipe it over. How condescending. Oh no, there's bacteria in the air. Now, if you spray an antibiotic in the air, or an antibacterial into the air, you're going to kill your gut your respiratory microbiome, and then when it's cleaned out by your mucus, it goes into and you're going to clean out your digestive microbiome. And you're going to kill your skin microbiome and every other microbiome that comes in contact with. So what you want to do is rethink it. Bacteria are fine. We live with them. There's no way known. If you really wanted to clean the bench, you'd have to clean the bench every minute, you know. Oh, there's more bacteria. Oh no, more bacteria. The OCD people would really have trouble, wouldn't they? If they knew how bacteria, because as soon as you touch it, there's another 100 million on there. And all of these things. So my message is just, if you want to clean a bench, use water. Use a hot cloth, water with hot cloth. If you want to get serious, use a bit of soap. If you want to super serious, use a bit of vinegar. But then it smells like a fish and chip shop. So you've got all these chemicals, and then you've got all the chemicals we put on our skin. And I wrote a little book back in 1999, a little pamphlet, 60 pages. We sold 50,000 copies around Australia. And I thought I created a movement against all these chemicals that we put on our skin and our hair and our, not makeup, but shampoos and conditioners, which, by the way, I don't use at all. And all these other bits and pieces. I travel around the country. I rewrote the book and 1,000 references and all that. And I travel around the country and I find out people are using safer ones, but they're using a lot more of them. The average Australian woman now is using putting 180 different chemicals on their skin every day. Now that's average. Now you're probably not putting any or very limited, and so there's people putting 300 and 400 on there, and they've got no idea what it's doing to them. But everything you put on your skin is going in through your system, or most of them going into your blood, and it's also going in here. Lipsticks, and they all go inside one way or another, and they get into your gut microbiome, and they all poison it. And there are some of the chemicals in there are called EDCs. Endocrine disrupting chemicals. They actually disrupt your estrogen levels, ladies, and they poison your thyroid. What? Yeah. They poison your thyroid. Everyone wonders why we've got thyroid problems, and this is one of the factors. And so we need to rethink that and learn and educate everyone around us about it. And then we've got dietary dysbiosis. That alone I can talk for the next 2 hours, 10 hours on dietary dysbiosis. I'm going to summarise it. Sugar and processed foods. You know this one's bad for you because it's got a Heart Foundation tick. Why? You know what a tick is? A little animal that gets under the skin and causes inflammation. Okay? Yeah. Who said they didn't know what a tick illness is? I do now. And it's basically it's based on financial investment. That's all it is. We've got the Heart Foundation tick on margarine. I'm sorry, folks, margarine is a toxic gut food, and yet it gets a Heart Foundation tick. The system that we rely on is corrupt. Whether it's the medical system, the health system, look at this one. It gets rating of 4. Milo gets a rating of 4.5. And what's important is almonds sometimes only get a rating of 4.5 or 4. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, but almonds are 100 times more potent and beautiful and fantastic to you than Milo, and yet it gets the same rating or less. It's corrupt. But the point is, we put up with it because we know, but most people don't. I get to 10,000 people a year. What about the other 25 million Australians who we don't get to? So you have to educate them. See, your purpose here isn't just to come and learn, it's to come and learn and share and tell people about it. So you stand in front of the cornflakes aisle and go, don't eat that. Don't eat that. Don't eat that. Oh no, let me tell you. See that rating up there? No. And we put pressure on the Heart Foundation to be honest. This big study in Europe again reiterated it's not saturated fats, it's processed foods. And the dietary associations, the dietetics associations get funding from all of the food groups. Now they've just made a policy this year or last year that they're going to phase it out. Why phase it out? Get rid of it. They cannot have a link with a toxic food company and be seen as being independent. And this is the corruption that happens at every level, whether it's pharmaceuticals or food. And we need to educate people. So all of these. And then we've got the takeaways. Look, one takeaway, if you're healthy, you've got a good microbiome, and if you've got a good mucus layer, then fine. This is going to be okay. However, you don't live on it and you don't have it every day and you have it, and then after it you try and wash it down as quickly as possible, with Coke, by the way, which will kill. No. But the single biggest cause of obesity in children is soft drinks. The single biggest cause of obesity in Australians is cereals. That's why I'm writing a book called Serial Killers. But it's true. And we ignore it. We ignore it because, oh no, the government says it's okay. And they get a 4.5 or a 5-star rating. Unless it's got nuts, fruit, veggies or beans or anything like that in it, then it's not good for you. And then we've got all the processed carbs, particularly the wheat products. And that's where, a little bit of wheat 50 years ago wouldn't have posed a problem, but now we have a lot of wheat with a lot of gluten, and we've got the mucus layer that's only this thin anymore. So no wonder it causes a problem. Everyone is vulnerable to it now.
And high pesticides.
And a whole raft of other issues, but this is where I get onto the, but also the toxins in water. The fact that, chlorine's added, which is right. You can get rid of the chlorine pretty easily. Leave it on a bench, boil the water, it goes into the air, just don't breathe it. You've got aluminium, copper and lead, which are all gut poisons, and they've got fluoride. Now this is a stupidity. Fluoride is a gut poison. Fluoride is an enzyme poison. Fluoride poisons the thyroid, ladies. But don't worry, along with your cosmetics and personal care and shampoos, which poison the thyroid, in America, the #1 best-selling drug every second year in a row is something called Synthroid, an artificial thyroid hormone. Rather than stopping the poisoning of it, we put more fluoride. Now here's the logic of our governments when it comes to all of this. Over here we've got something that causes tooth decay. What causes tooth decay? Sugar. So to get rid of tooth decay, what we do is we put in fluoride, which poisons us. See the stupidity? And it's all money. It's all vested interest. They're not interested. See, the health department decisions are made unilaterally by a group of people who have vested interest in it, and who have been working in there, and like premiers retire into these nice positions around the place. Then we've got, somehow I've lost my chemical dysbiosis, but we've got all those chemicals in our environment too, the sprays and everything, other bits and pieces. And then we've got our lifestyle factors. Even our lifestyles play a role in our gut. Our gut listens to it and is impacted by it. If you sleep badly, it affects the gut microbiome, and your gut microbiome can influence your sleep patterns. So where do you start? Well, you can start by rebuilding the gut microbiome and hopefully getting better sleep and doing certain things. Your energy that you have is determined by your gut, and vice versa, it comes back. They now know that your gut microbiome, if you're under stress, your gut microbiome can read the chemicals, e.g. cortisol, in your blood and say, there's cortisol, this person's stressed. 100 years ago, if you were stressed, it meant you were going to die. So they read it and say, we're the opportunistic ones, we're going to breed up really quickly. They're always there, but then they get a chance to breed up because they know you're stressed. And so this is where I emphasize the psychological, the social and the emotional triggers for a lot of gut issues. Any form of stress, physical, emotional, psychological, can all shut down your digestion. They can shut down your production of hydrochloric acid, which gets everything going there. They can shut down your microbiome. They can change which ones are in there and which ones are breeding up and which ones are taking over and which ones are poisoning you or feeding you. And then when you're stressed, on top of that, what you tend to do is eat the replenishing foods like sugar and cakes and these other bits and pieces. So the message is, what we need to do is build in our program, the holistic program that I'm educating you about, is we have to build some stress control. And meditation isn't about sitting cross-legged on the floor, shaving your head and going Om. Okay, even though that looks a bit like me, doesn't it? Yeah. It's about just bringing some calm and peace into your life. I have a very active life, and I also have a very calm part of my life too, that every day I take the time to actually stop and meditate. Not medicate, meditate. It's one of the best things you can do. And even elite athletes, extreme athletes, have serious gut dysbiosis problems. And again, part of that is probably the diet they're on, because they're constantly told to eat more carbs when they should be eating more nutrients. If the carbs are there, good, but they need more nutrients. So leading on to this is a little model I haven't got to put together yet. I'm terrible on graphics, and I'll stay like this for 6 months until someone does it for me. But this is my microbiome food pyramid. And the first one is water. So the first thing in the morning, when you wake up and you have your sodium bicarb, straight after it, you have 2, 3, 4, 5 cups of water, lemon water, green tea, herbal tea, hibiscus tea if you've got high blood pressure, a study I put up today. So all of this, so you have liquid, because the first thing it does is cleans the system out. It helps flush through things straight away. Nothing works without water, and over night time most of you are dehydrating. Then you wake up and then you have the herbs and spices, which are really great prebiotics. In those have the fibre. They are absolutely fantastic. Now, with this group, this is all it is. This is the fibre in veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, herbs and spices. That's what we should be eating. There is no question about it. A lot of people say, but Pete, can I eat meat? Look, if you're going to have meat, the only meat you should be having is a little bit of fresh mincemeat without the nitrates and preservatives. Why? It's already ground up. And by the time it gets into you, it's already started to pre-digest itself. Yep, that's the only meat. If you have to have meat, so you do it that way, and it's going to be the easiest one to digest. And a lot of people find a lot of foods hard to digest. You have to work out your own program. So and then we've got the added fibre I've already told you about. And then the bacteria love polyphenols. The good bacteria love the polyphenols. The green tea polyphenols, the apple polyphenols, the carrot polyphenols. When Martine and I travel around the country, we've got a car, we're doing 3 weeks, then we go back home, we do some in WA, then we come back a month after that and do another around, and on a cruise ship, by the way, too. Oh, did I tell you we do talks on cruise ships? No. Yeah, it's hard life, isn't it? I know, sorry. Someone has to suffer this stuff. But anyway, coming back to there, I did tell you a cruise ship, yeah, that's right. The polyphenols and so on, they love the polyphenols. You've got to feed them the polyphenols. And that's where dark chocolate comes in a benefit. Dark chocolate, but look at the sugar content. And probably the best one you get is about 11%. Okay, after that, they all get too sugary. You've got some without sugar, and I'm not even sure how you can put them in your mouth, but anyway. Then you've got your coffees, which are rich in polyphenols, however, no sugar. Teas rich in polyphenols, no sugar. A little bit of milk's bearable if you have to. We don't use it anymore. Simply, I'm not a big fan of milk for any reason, okay? We have coconut milk, almond milk, nut seed milk. We make our own because we've got a machine that makes it and so on. And then vitamins and minerals. Please don't forget that your cells need vitamins and minerals, and they need them from your digestion, and most of us don't get enough minerals. So supplementing with some minerals, some colloidal minerals in particular, is absolutely brilliant. Vitamins, I take 3 grams of vitamin C a day. See, what's really important with the nutrients, the first place they have an impact is the gut. So if I want to fix my gut, I take something like the turmeric chai, vitamin C, or the green tea, and the first place it works is stopping inflammation in the gut. How's that? And then when it's done its work there, it goes into the body and stops the inflammation in other parts. That's how it works. First the gut, then the rest of the body. So if I've got a gut issue, which we all do, and you want it to repair and rebuild that gut lining, the gut wall, and then the mucus layer, you've got to feed it the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory foods. That's what you have to feed it. Hence why I take 3 grams of vitamin C a day. And if I'm sick, it's 20 grams. Now, I'm not recommending any dose to anyone. This is what I do every day. And I don't have a sick gut, and I'm healthy as far as I can tell. I think I'm healthy, 92, something, pretty healthy 92-year-old. So we go back there, then we go on to fermented foods. Now the benefit of fermented foods is that they have a relatively low number compared to probiotics, they've got a diverse mix. So your kombucha, kimchi, your sauerkraut all have 150 to 100 different microorganisms, of which some of them may be of benefit to you.
What about the histamines?
Well, that's a whole other issue for people who are histamine sensitive, and same with probiotics too. But I can't go into that because, again, it takes too long. So they are of benefit, but there are lots of ways of getting these microorganisms. And the next one is probiotics. Now, I think probiotics have a really important role in healing gut and maintaining it. But with a probiotic, they're not designed to actually go in there, stop, and grow. They're designed to actually pass through, and as they pass through, they take the stress off. And the research shows that two strains of microorganisms, one of the lactobacillus and another one of bifido, goes into the gut and in the process of going through high dose long enough, it actually starts to kill off the toxic ones and it starts to breed the other positive ones. So it helps make room for the other good ones, the real gut microorganisms that do the work. And it looks after them. And one of those microorganisms they found recovers is Akkermansia mycinophilia, if you have just 2-dose high probiotics. Now, if you have one, let's say for depression, it might have 14 different, and there was a study where they actually found 14 different probiotics combined together to reduce depression. Until you fix the gut, you'll have to have those 14 every single day, because they don't get into the gut. So you've got to breed the microorganisms in the gut. How do you do that? It's the fibre. It's hopefully some of the ones you'll get out of the kombucha kimchi and all those other ones. But you've got to get human strain ones, not the ones that are grown in the laboratory and factory. And the last part of that is the way you're going to do all that is nutrient-dense foods. But one extra component of that nutrient-dense food is raw. Raw. Why raw? Because raw foods are what we are supposed to have. Now, because you've got a good stomach acid now, because you've been to the lecture, you've got a good stomach acid, a pH of 1 starts off and only goes up to 3, then that means the toxic ones won't get through, but the good ones will. Some of them will. And every bit of raw food is laden with microorganisms. It's got microorganisms on it. So I've got an apple here, the skin, it's got microorganisms. I eat them, some of them will get through, and some of them, that's how we have constantly re-inoculated our gut microbiome, by having raw foods. But what we haven't done, what we don't do anymore, is eat raw foods. Majority of people in Australia have processed and cooked foods, and they're lucky to have 1 piece of raw food a day. Whereas what we should be having is more raw. And more raw 25. And the more raw 25, some people have sensitivities, you know what it is, and the best way we do it is with our smoothie maker. That's our smoothie maker, making one of our delicious green smoothies. Our grandkids live on smoothies and nuts when they come over. Why? It's got probiotics on it, very low doses, well, not even probiotics, microbiome, hopefully reinitiating ones. It's got prebiotics. When you cook any type of food, you change the fibre structure in it. And the fibre structure and the chemicals in the food you have been designed to listen to. I'll give you an example. If you have an apple, you'll have 1, maybe 2, then you'll feel really full, right? However, if I cook 12 of them, cook them, put a bit of pastry, cream on top of them, you will eat a dozen apples and you still feel hungry, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's called an apple pie, by the way, if you didn't realise my recipe for it. And you think, oh, I'm getting all the goodies. No, because the fiber's been changed, the chemicals in the apple have been changed, so it no longer sends messages to your ancient body to say I'm full. Hence, processing is the best way to put on weight. You want to put on weight? Processing food is the best way to poison your gut microbiome. So you have to have raw, some more raw. How much raw? It depends on you. We went on 10 days before we came, we did totally raw. One of the reasons was I was a little bit sick in Bali. Not very sick, but just a little bit for one night. I came back, we said raw, okay? And that raw made a huge difference to how I feel. On the road now, we don't get as much access, and I can tell you, my body feels the difference. Now, how much raw? Slowly move across onto it. But smoothies are by far the best one. And why raw is so good is also all foods come with enzymes to digest themselves. So if you have an apple and you squeeze it, it starts to digest. It goes brown. That's oxidized. You call it oxide, but the enzymes have been released to break it down. Same with meat. You hammer it, it releases the catspin, the enzymes to break it down. So all your food is designed to digest. When you cook a food, it's not digestible anymore and your body has to struggle. More hydrochloric acid, more pepsin, more of the enzymes in your small intestine, it struggles. So the easiest way to eat foods is to add more raw, and have some raw with some cooked, and have some foods that are rich in enzymes, your pawpaw, papaya, your mango, your miso, your soya sauce, okay, are all rich in enzymes to help digest, and there's a lot more information on that, and it makes it easier. Finally, the last question a lot of people ask is, what about alcohol? Because it's rich in a polyphenol called resveratrol. And resveratrol is a potent antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, it's fantastic. But guess what? You have to have 300 glasses of red wine to have your daily dose. And that will kill you. So that's not why there is any benefit. And the benefit of red wine is exaggerated. But if there is a benefit, and it's really hard in science because of the vested interest, okay? But if there is a benefit, it's only one glass. And if there is a benefit, it's because it's got acetic acid in it. And acetic acid is anti-inflammatory. Oh, by the way, you've got acetic acid in vinegar too. And that's the best way to have it. 10 mils, if you can handle the histamines. 10 mil of apple cider vinegar mixed 5-to-1 minimum in water. Never drink it straight, never drink it straight, never drink it straight. Do you get that idea? And you have that with a meal. Not only is it anti-inflammatory, it helps regulate your blood glucose, and it's been shown to be associated and linked with weight loss. So you have it with a meal, as distinct from the apple cider vinegar first thing, the sodium bicarb first thing. So you have it with a meal. But it tastes terrible. So what we did was got a cocktail glass. Just before dinner, cocktail glass, put a little bit in there, put some bubbly water in there and an olive. Yeah. And it still tasted crap. But at least we thought we'd try and psych ourselves into it, and it didn't work. So after a week we gave up, and now I just down the vinegar when I have some vinegar with me. And how often? Well, how sick are you? How much can you tolerate? It's your program. If you can have it with each meal, don't do it in between meals. If you can have it with each meal, fantastic. Do it that way. Do it once a day, whatever it is. It's anti-inflammatory. By the way, I should also say with sodium bicarb first thing in the morning, all the research on sodium bicarb shows that it increases. In fact, if anyone here into horse racing? No. If you want to pep up a horse, it's illegal to. You give them sodium bicarb. It improves their performance on the racetrack. Yep. There's a lot of studies on the benefits of sodium bicarb as an anti-inflammatory, as an alkalizing agent. And remember, it's only a part of my 50-cent solution. Isn't it simple? So with that in mind, alcohol, hey, the only other real benefit of alcohol is you have it prior to a meal. It's rich in enzymes, and you have it with friends. But the problem is Australian wines have a lot more sulphur in them. And sulphur is not very good for bacteria. Moving on, where do you go from here? Well, I've given you a summary over the last 2 hours, which I know you're going to go away and literally digest. The problem is, it's a fraction of what we have come across and what we do, so we write the book so people can walk away and go, okay, I know what to do. This book, everyone will ask me, this book is all about inflammation and oxidation and acidosis. This book links with all the chronic illnesses and then shows you the things that are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, and it explains it so you know exactly all illness, where all illness comes from. This one is about the gut microbiome, it's about healthy digestion, it's about the pH, what I've been talking about, how that all flows through and how to help rebuild it and what to do. Now, there are many, many parts I didn't talk about. For example, I touched on gluten, but I didn't even mention lectins. And some of you are saying, oh, what about lectins, okay? Lectins, I think it's overdone because this guy who works on it has a product to sell. But if you've got a thin gut wall and a thin mucus layer, then lectins are going to be a problem. Now, if you don't know what lectins is, you'll have to find out in the book. But there's a whole raft of these gut poisons that I talk about in the book. Again, 100 times more than what we've got here. And then this is the how-to. What steps I take to rebuild my gut, what steps I take, how do I ferment, what can I ferment, some of the recipes that are healthier and so on. This is the how-to, step-by-step process that will lead you through to it. And sure, some of you are doing bits and pieces, but it's about putting it all together with more knowledge from the books and this talk into the formula that suits you. I'll reiterate it, it's your recipe for your own gut healing. It's totally different to everyone else's, but it's great to learn from it. And then we've got a great book. By the way, this one's got a very big chapter all on the gut microbiome, but also on a whole raft of other things that are linked with weight loss. This book here is about sustainable healthy eating. It's sustainable healthy eating, and so we tell people if you've got the gut, ready, set, gut, get that one, and that's the follow-on. Once you've got your gut healthy and so on. And then Dangerous Beauty I've told you about. Does that one look fuzzy to you? Yeah. I think that's a sign of gut health. Now, joking on that one, okay? But that's the book all about toxic chemicals in the home. And again, eye-opening for the majority of people to understand that we're just overburdened with all these chemicals and we think it's normal. And we've got all these other ones around. These are also on our website. We've got them as e-books on our website too. But the amount of information in all of these, most of our books here, for example, Reversing Heart Disease, there's 1,000 references. because I'm passionate about getting this evidence out there. And same with the Red and the Blue book. There's 1,000 scientific studies that have gone in there. My next book, or one of them, will be all on fibre. How exciting. And there's 1,000 references on that. This is a water filter we normally sell. We don't have them at the moment. They're on our website. They're the only ones who take out 99.9% of the fluoride and all the toxins, alkalize, mineralize, and it tastes good too. We actually travel with one of these as well, and that's our smoothie. That's called a ladyship. These are all on our website.
How much are they?
I don't know. I don't know how much they are on our website. They were supposed to get us some so we could give to you cheaply, but
About 190.
yeah. And these are the only smoothie maker in the world that you can. They've got a filter in it and a tap. You can make almond. Who likes almond milk?
Yeah.
You can make almond milk in 10 seconds for 50 cents a litre. So that's how much it costs, and you can add any other. You can do nut milk, macadamia milk for $2 a litre, by the way. But all the other ones, you just make your almond milk and it goes through a filter, it comes out, it's beautiful. This is what our grandkids live on. The stuff.
After 5 years,
Yeah.
still going strong.
And it gets used every day. We got to the stage of umming and ahhing if we were going to bring it with us. But the hotel rooms don't like the noise. 5 o'clock in the morning, making a smoothie. And then we've got our books. We're on the social media. We've got an events and tour dates. Please, if you've got some good information about this, would you please send people to the next talks? The majority of our talks are booked out. This, by the way, was a last minute one because my friend over there, Pete, said, can I put one on? And so I said yes, so he organised everything. We're running it here. However, we have in Ballarat, we're already 150 there. Most of the locations are at 100 and the rooms are just over 100. But we'd love even more because we want to get this message out there. Now, the only way we can do that is if you help us. First, tell your friends. Share with them what you learned. I know they'll learn to hate you, won't they? You know, oh, Dr. Dingle said. But we've got the tour dates and events. We've also got all our social media up there. And we've got a Facebook group, Gut Health Australia. Join.
Yeah.
Because not only do I put up studies, but everyone puts up questions and they get answered, not by me, but by everybody who's had experience in there. And that's where we're going to solve this problem. And when we've got 100,000 people in that group, it's now up to just over 4,500 after 6 months. When we get 100,000, we'll make a difference in Australia. So please, go up, have a look at the books, ask us questions. Thank you all very much and God bless. Thank you.